The SCP Foundation has lived on wiki pages for over a decade, thousands of anomalies described in cold, clinical language designed to make the impossible feel documented. But somewhere along the way, filmmakers started asking what these files would actually look like brought to life. Tactical breaches, reality fractures, cosmic nightmares, all rendered with budgets that have no business looking this good. These are the ones that changed everything. SCP Overlord. If you've seen any SCP fan film, it's probably this one. Released in 2020, directed by Evan Royalty, and sitting on a channel with over 871,000 subscribers, Overlord is the film that made people realize SCP could actually work as cinema, not as a cheap YouTube skit, not as a glorified creepypasta reading, as an actual legitimate film. The premise is deceptively simple. A tactical team from a secret NGO breaches the home of an esoteric cult suspected of anomalous activity. That's it. That's the setup. But here's where it gets complicated. The operators in this thing move like a real mobile task force. We're talking full tactical choreography, proper stacking, comms discipline, the works. Fans immediately associated them with Epsilon 11 Nine-Tailed Fox, and honestly, the comparison tracks. These aren't action movie soldiers. They're professionals walking into something they can't shoot their way out of, because the cult's practices aren't symbolic. They're real. Whatever these people have been worshipping, whatever rituals they've been performing, they've tapped into something that exists, something that doesn't care how many rounds you have in your magazine. The film's entire emotional core lives in that tension between tactical competence and cosmic helplessness. These operators are the best at what they do, and it doesn't matter. MDB lists it as a formal short film with full cast and crew credits. The community consistently calls it the most professional SCP fan film ever made, and they're not wrong. But if Overlord is the crown jewel everyone's already seen, what about the rest of the ecosystem? Because there's an entire world of SCP cinema most people have completely missed, starting with a house that is very much not what it seems. SCP Dollhouse Overlord proved that Evan Royalty could make a tactical horror film that rivaled studio productions, but Dollhouse proved he could make you afraid of a house, not a haunted house, not a creepy mansion on a hill with lightning behind it, a suburban home, the kind with a front lawn and a mailbox and probably a welcome mat. That's what makes this one land differently. The premise is deceptively simple. A group of Foundation MTF operators receive reports of anomalous activity inside a residential home and are dispatched to investigate. Standard containment protocol: breach the door, clear the rooms, neutralize the threat, except the house doesn't want to be cleared. Here's where it gets complicated. The dollhouse isn't just a building with something scary inside it. The house itself is the anomaly. The entire structure manipulates space, perception, and possibly time, folding in on the operators like a living organism digesting its prey. Rooms connect to places they shouldn't. Hallways loop. You watch these trained, heavily armed professionals become completely disoriented inside what should be a 3-bedroom nothing of a home, and that's what separates Dollhouse from Overlord. In Overlord, there's something to shoot at. In Dollhouse, the architecture is hostile. You can't mag dump a staircase that leads back to itself. The production quality is borderline absurd for a fan film. The camera work, the VFX, the sound design, all operating at a level that makes you forget you're watching something made outside the studio system. The community consensus is pretty clear. This is one of the scariest SCP films ever made, precisely because the horror could be sitting on any street in any neighborhood. The topology of the entire structure is hostile and possibly sentient, which is, not ideal for the guys trapped inside it. But if you think a living house is unsettling, wait until you hear what Evan Royalty found in a mine in the Yukon SCP First Contact. Before Evan Royalty became the guy who made SCP look like a legitimate Hollywood production, he made this. And honestly, it's kind of perfect as an origin story. The setup is straightforward. A field agent operating under the name Eugene Smith tips off local Foundation personnel about a conspicuous mine in the Yukon Territory of Canada. His request is simple: armed examination. Not a polite investigation, armed examination, which tells you everything you need to know about what he suspected was down there. Here's the thing about that mine. It's not just a setting, it's a weapon against the people entering it. Narrow tunnels that eliminate any tactical advantage a trained squad might have. Visibility so poor you can barely see the person in front of you. You can't flank something in a mine shaft. You can't retreat quickly. You just push forward and hope whatever's ahead of you isn't faster than your trigger finger. But the real horror isn't the tight spaces, it's the name. First Contact means the Foundation has zero playbook for whatever these operators are about to encounter. No containment protocols, no prior documentation. They're walking into a hole in the ground to meet something that might not even fit into existing classification systems, which is, not ideal. What Royalty proves here is that he understands how to make armed operators feel genuinely vulnerable. The choreography in those tight corridors, the way the team has to function as a unit despite barely being able to move, the tension of watching trained professionals slowly realize they're outmatched. The community recognized it immediately. This was one of the first SCP fan films where people watched it and thought, wait, this actually looks real. It's a short film with a limited budget. But that limitation forced royalty to master close quarters tension before he ever attempted anything bigger. You can see the DNA of everything that came after: the tactical realism, the ensemble dynamics, the refusal to let the camera look away when things go wrong. But if First Contact proved royalty could make horror work in a cramped mineshaft, his next project would prove he could make it work anywhere. Containment by Fortin Creature. Here's the thing about the SCP Foundation. You've got reality-bending entities, eldritch gods, creatures that can wipe out continents just by existing. And somehow, one of the most unsettling concepts this community has ever produced is a janitor. That's not a joke. The SCP fan animation space has exploded over the past few years, and one concept that keeps grabbing people is the idea of an anomaly that isn't locked in a cell. It's just working, pushing a mop down a hallway, clocking in, a janitor inside the Foundation who might be the most dangerous thing in the building. Horror that doesn't need a single gunshot to land. The entire premise flips the Foundation's power structure on its head. You've got researchers, site directors, mobile task force operators, all these people with clearance levels and tactical gear, and somewhere in the background is an anomaly that none of them fully understand. He's not behind reinforced glass, he's just mopping floors, which is, not ideal when the thing mopping your floors might be immortal. The SCP animation as a medium sells this perfectly. Dark, angular, emotionally charged in a way that live-action SCP films don't always achieve. A figure like the janitor occupies this space between mundane and terrifying that animation is uniquely suited to capture. You can't get that uncanny quality with a real actor holding a real mop, but stylized animation lets you feel something is fundamentally wrong without showing you exactly what. What makes this more than a creepy concept is the ethical question underneath. If the Foundation knows this entity is anomalous and they're letting it work as staff, what does that make them? The Foundation has always existed in morally gray territory, but using a potentially immortal being as a maintenance worker is a specific kind of cold that hits different. That's what separates the animated side of SCP from the live-action tactical stuff. The scariest thing in the building isn't behind a locked door, it's the guy who has the keys to all of them. But if you think a single anomaly hiding in plain sight is disturbing, wait until you see what happens when one gets its own animated series. Confinement by Lord Bung. Most SCP films give you a single mission. You go in, something horrible happens, maybe you survive, probably you don't, roll credits. Confinement looked at that formula and said, what if we never let you leave? Created by Lord Bung, Confinement is an animated series that ran from 2017 to 2019 and follows Connor, a nihilistic immortal trapped inside a massive Foundation facility filled with things that should not exist. Each episode throws Connor into a different containment nightmare. And because the series is serialized, the stakes actually build. Characters develop, consequences carry over. You get attached to people in a place specifically designed to destroy them. Here's the thing about Connor's immortality. It sounds like a superpower until you realize what it actually means. He dies, repeatedly, violently, and then he comes back, fully aware of what just happened, knowing it's going to happen again. Death isn't a consequence for Connor. It's a recurring scheduled event. The horror isn't situational anymore. It's existential, which is, not ideal. But what makes Confinement genuinely special is the tone. Lord Bung balanced bleak, gut-punch horror with sharp, dark humor in a way that felt completely natural. Connor's sarcasm isn't a shield the audience sees through. It's a coping mechanism the audience shares. You laugh because the alternative is sitting in silence, thinking about what immortality inside a containment facility actually means on a long enough timeline. And then Lord Bung left the internet and deleted everything. The entire series, gone. The creator vanished. Fans woke up one day and the show simply didn't exist anymore. If that sounds familiar, it should, because it's basically an SCP article. Lost information, redacted files. A thing that was real, documented, and discussed by thousands of people, just erased. The community responded the only way SCP fans know how. They archived episodes, built wikis, and collectively refused to let Confinement disappear. But if a deleted animated series feels like a loss, wait until you see what happens when SCP horror gets dropped into a real physical location you can walk through. SCP Ghost Town. Most SCP films drop you inside a facility. Locked doors, flickering lights, the whole claustrophobic package. Ghost Town does something different. It drops you outside into a place where the walls aren't keeping something in. They're just empty. Created by Dark Math Films, this one is explicitly branded as a live-action SCP short, but the full title is SCP Academy Part 001, The Containment Breach. That word academy is doing a lot of heavy lifting. You're not just watching a horror short, you're watching a training exercise, a demonstration of how the Foundation prepares its people for the worst day of their lives. And here's the thing, that framing is what makes Ghost Town genuinely unique in this lineup. The setting is a near-empty town. No civilians, no signs of life, just Foundation field teams, clearing buildings, securing perimeters, and communicating through radio chatter and hand signals. It's boots on the ground, tactical realism without any big VFX budget. Dark Math Films committed to making containment work look like actual work. Methodical, tense, unglamorous. But the emptiness is where the real horror lives. Every doorway could have something behind it. Every alley is a potential ambush point. The anomaly isn't contained in a cell anymore. It's loose, somewhere between the pharmacy and the post office, which is, you know, not ideal. The film pulled around 594,000 views on YouTube, solid for a production that trades spectacle for atmosphere. No creatures lunging at the camera, no jump scares built around CGI monsters, just the slow, grinding tension of professionals sweeping a dead town and waiting for something to go wrong. The Academy framing implicitly tells you that this is how horror gets managed inside Foundation doctrine, not with heroics, with procedure, with checklists and overlapping fields of fire, and the quiet understanding that the next room might kill you. But if you think structured containment work in an empty town sounds intense, wait until you hear about a project that tried to send a Foundation agent undercover into something far worse. SCP Heretic. Sometimes the most haunting entries in any creative medium are the ones that never actually existed. SCP Heretic is a ghost, not a canceled film, but a concept that floated through community discussions and vanished before it ever became anything concrete. No trailer, no production team, just an idea and a whole lot of what ifs. Here's what the concept was. Heretic would have been a series following a field agent going undercover inside a group of interest. A splinter cell that had fused anomalous practices with religious devotion. Think artists and zealots who treat reality-bending objects the way normal people treat prayer beads. They make things, horrible, beautiful, impossible things, and they don't particularly care if someone dies witnessing them. But this group had gone further than experimentation. They'd taken on religious dimensions, believing their work would lead to divine knowledge. Anomalous practitioners who'd essentially become a cult, fusing creative expression with faith in pursuit of something transcendent. The premise called for a field agent to infiltrate, earn their trust, and report back while a tactical team stood ready in case everything went sideways. Let me be clear about what that actually is. That's an espionage thriller layered on top of mimetic horror, layered on top of a theological crisis. The agent wouldn't just be dodging bullets. They'd be surrounded by anomalous works that could rewrite their perception of reality, practiced by true believers approaching what they think is godhood. Every conversation is a potential cognito hazard. The battlefield isn't physical, it's epistemological. Nobody in SCP cinema has attempted anything close to this. Most fan films focus on containment breaches, things you can shoot at. This proposed something completely different. A story about faith, art, and whether pursuing forbidden knowledge makes you enlightened or just makes you a tool for something you can't comprehend. And it never materialized. Not canceled in some dramatic fashion. It just dissolved. A premise this conceptually ambitious, and it exists only as a description of what could have been. The tragedy isn't that someone killed it, it's that nothing has filled the gap it left behind. But if Heretic is a ghost that never materialized, the next entry is very much real, very much watchable, and very much proof that atmosphere alone can carry an entire film. Site 22. Here's something most people don't realize about SCP fan films. Before the big budgets, before Evan Royalty was choreographing tactical horror in mines and suburban death traps, someone had to prove that this stuff could even work on screen. That the Foundation's brand of horror, the cold hallways and fluorescent lighting flickering over things you're not supposed to see, could translate from text to film without a single named monster carrying the weight. Site 22 is that proof. The entire short film is built around a Foundation facility. That's it. No marquee SCP entry, no creature feature, no big reveal where something with too many limbs crawls out of a containment cell. The building itself is the horror. Corridors that go on slightly too long. Machinery running behind walls for purposes nobody explains. explains. Lighting that makes every room feel 3 seconds away from a lockdown. The architecture does the heavy lifting, and it works. The production leans almost entirely on practical environments. Real locations, real lighting, real sound design. No elaborate CGI stitching impossible geometry together, just actual physical spaces dressed up to feel like a classified facility where something has gone very wrong. Your brain fills in the gaps, and your brain is significantly worse to you than any rendering software could be. What makes Site-22 quietly important is what it established for everyone who came after. The visual shorthand that later SCP filmmakers now take for granted, the monochrome security halls, the warning signage, the sterile color grading that screams you are not supposed to be here. A lot of that language traces back to early projects like this one. The film is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 Unported. That's not a footnote, that's the SCP ethos made tangible. The same open source philosophy that lets anyone write an SCP article also lets anyone build on or redistribute this film. The whole ecosystem runs on that principle, and Site-22 committed to it from day one. Not every horror film needs a creature. Sometimes the scariest thing on screen is a building that clearly knows something you don't. But if you think atmosphere alone is unsettling, wait until you see what happens when someone takes that foundation and fractures reality itself on top of it. Fragmented. This one isn't a film. It's not even a finished product, but it might be the most important thing on this entire list. SCP Fragmented Minds is a gameplay demo, a first-person horror experience rendered in 4K at 60 frames per second, running on an RTX 3080 with a release date that still just says TBA. And honestly, the fact that it exists at all tells you everything about where this community is heading. Here's the thing. For the last decade, SCP fans have been watching horror, watching operators breach doors, watching agents lose their minds, watching containment fail from a safe distance behind a screen. Fragmented Minds says no, you're not watching anymore. You're inside. You're the one walking down sterile corridors with warning signs you can't fully read. You're the one hearing something behind a blast door that shouldn't be open. You're the one whose mind is coming apart because the environment itself is a cognitohazard and your perception cannot be trusted. The title alone tells you what kind of horror this is. Fragmented minds, not fragmented bodies, not fragmented facilities. Your brain, the thing you use to process whether you're safe. That's what's under attack. And the environments look exactly like what you'd expect from a containment site. Security checkpoints, anomaly storage, corridors that feel too long, rooms that feel too empty. Except now you're not watching a camera follow an MTF squad through them. You're there. Every wrong turn is yours, but what makes this genuinely significant is the production quality. This isn't some janky Unity asset flip with SCP slapped on the title. The visual fidelity rivals mainstream horror releases. Photorealistic lighting, volumetric fog, material quality that holds up at 4K without flinching. A community-driven project with AAA-level ambition. That's not where fan projects usually end up. Think about the trajectory. Site-22 gave us atmospheric dread on a modest budget. Overlord pushed into near-professional cinematography with real actors and tactical choreography. And now Fragmented Minds is delivering interactive, photorealistic nightmare fuel that you don't just watch, but inhabit. Less than a decade. That's how long it took for SCP Cinema to go from small passion projects filmed in actual hallways to fully realized interactive experiences that put you inside containment and dare you to keep your sanity intact. The short films proved that SCP horror works on screen. Fragmented Minds is proving that the next step isn't better cameras or bigger budgets. It's removing the barrier between viewer and victim entirely. You are the containment breach. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.